Hello and welcome to all of you who are joining us today for our webinar. My name is Ro and I am part of Knack's customer success team. Before I get into the details of the webinar, I want to give you a brief overview of what Knack is. Knack is a powerful online database that provides a secure location for you to collect and manage all of your data. So we have a few components to our software in the building process. You'll hear me throughout the webinar refer to the builder and the live application or the live app. The builder is where all of your data is defined and stored, and this includes the data tab and a pages tab. The data tab is where you define your data, and this is also where your data is stored. The pages tab is where you design how your users will interact with your data using tools like forms, reports, maps, and more. You can then access your app through the live application where users can view and update the data that you have shared with them. Once you have defined your data and designed your application, you have a couple of options for sharing your live application. You can generate a snippet of code and embed this in your website, or you can simply have your users access your live application at your personalized Knack URL. So what will we be going through in this webinar specifically? We'll be taking a tour of a live application, and for this webinar, we'll take a look at the Customer Portal template app. We'll also explore the builder and learn how to build out our first web app. And we'll be using the Customer Portal as an example. So I'll be showing you how to define your data, how to create relationships, and how to add users and connect them to their data. Then we'll build pages for our users to access their data, and then I'll show you how to enable permissions and create forms and tables and more. To wrap up the webinar, I'll be taking questions, so feel free to leave your questions in the Q&A section here on the right. If we have a lot of questions, I may not get to all of them today. However, I will do my best to answer as many as I can with whatever time we have left. We will also be sending out a survey afterwards, so feel free to share any additional questions you have there or reach out to us at team@knack.com. So let's get started. Let's take a look at a live application. As mentioned before, we are going to be taking a look at the Customer Portal template app. With this app, customers can log in, they can view their service requests, they can submit new service requests, and they can view their invoices. So let's log into our app. So here is our Customer Portal dashboard. On the dashboard, you will see what we call views. We have a menu view, a rich text view, and a table view. The menu shows links to pages where the customer would submit a request, view all of their service requests, they can see their invoices, and they can also update their account. Now, this page also has a rich text view, which you'll see here. This rich text view is great for adding custom text using a WYSIWYG editor. And then below the rich text view, we also have a table that allows the customer to view their active service requests. Now, quick note here, there is a link on the table where users can click and see more details about that service request. So taking a closer look at the menu, customers can submit a service request, you'll see once the request has been submitted, you can navigate back to the previous page where we will see the new service requests. The next menu item here is where customers can view all of their service requests. You'll see a table where the customer can further click on the view link to see more details about that request. The next menu item is Review Invoices. Here, customers can then review their invoices. And again, they can click on the View Invoice link here to see more information about that invoice. Lastly, there is a menu item to take customers to a page where they can update their account. Now that we have seen the customer portal app from the customer's point of view, how about we take a look from the business manager's point of view? Now, I'd like to note here before diving in, each portal has a different URL. Let's log in as the business manager. You can see that we have a completely different view here. Additionally, if we navigated back to the customer portal URL and refreshed, we don't have access to these pages. So going back to our business manager dashboard and starting at the top, you'll see a similar layout but with slightly different views on the page. Again, we have a menu view, a rich text view, and a table view. This looks much like our customer dashboard. However, the manager has a different level of access to the data, and they're going to be seeing different information. They have menu links to see all customers, services, and invoices. They also have a table view to show all open services. And on the open services table, they can click the view service link to see additional info. You'll also see on this page they now have an option to edit the service record. So let's go back and take a closer look at the menu. Managers can view all customers, and we have a menu item on this page where managers can add new customers. We also have a table view where they can see all of their customers. And additionally, if we were to click the view link to see more details about that customer, they are not only going to be able to see the details about the customer, but one really cool feature here and part of what Connections is about, which we'll learn about later, is the ability for the manager to see the services and invoices related to that customer. And again, we have links on each of these tables to take us to more details. We can next take a look at the services page. Here we have two tables, one to show open service requests and another to show completed service requests. Now, another note here, the records in these tables are being filtered to show records with a status of open or complete, and you would set this up in what we call our data source tab, which you'll find in the settings for your views. So this is something you can filter ahead of time. You can also see that there is a link to view more details, and on that page the user can also edit the record. Lastly, managers can add and view invoices. So if we go to our Invoices tab, managers can add invoices by clicking the menu item here, and they also have the option to click on a link in the table to view more details about each invoice. And notice on this page there's a button to, again, edit the invoice as well. So there's a lot of flexibility here to customize what your users can see and do with the data. So this concludes our tour of the Customer Portal template app of the Live application. One of our most popular features is user authentication and the ability to show the logged in users only the data that relates to them. So we were able to log in as the customer and as the business manager and see different information for each role. Now, before we jump into building our first app, as mentioned at the start, leave any questions that you have in the Q&A section of our conference room. Also, I'd like to hear from you. What type of app are you looking to build? So feel free to share that information as well. Okay, so let's get into this. As mentioned, we are going to be showing you how to build your first web app. So since we just toured the customer portal, we're going to build out a portion of that app. So what's our workflow? We'll want our customers to be able to log in, submit service requests, and view their service requests. So before we begin to build out our live application, we need to define our data. Each piece of data we want to store and manage in Knack is called a field, and related fields are grouped into what we call objects or user roles. If you're coming from spreadsheets, think of an object as a spreadsheet where each field is a column. You can also look at it in terms of a form. It could be, an object could be a form, and those fields again in the form are the same here in Knack, they're fields. To start defining our data, we'll start on the Data tab. And the Data tab is where we will add our user roles, our objects, our fields, and we will make our connections. For our customer portal, we want our customers to be able to log into the app and add and view their service requests. The way permissions and access work with Knack is by first defining which user roles can access our app, and then by building out those pages for that user role, and then by determining the types of views that will go on each page. We'll talk more on that in a bit. So the first thing we will need to do is create a user role for our customer. Again, user roles will allow us to create login access to pages for users like the business manager, who will be managing and viewing all form submissions from various objects, or customers who will be viewing only data related to them. So the first thing we will do is click Add next to Users. This step will activate user logins for our app. Once active, we'll need to decide what type of login our app will use. Now, you can have one login for the entire app. This is great for internal purposes if all users will have the same level of access to the data, or you can create logins for different pages and user roles. This is great for, as mentioned, limiting access to data based on the user role, like in our customer portal app where customers have a different level of access than the business manager. Now, for our customer portal app, we'll create logins for different pages. The next question here asks more specific questions about how we want our users to register. You can add users yourself, you can allow users to register and get instant access, or you can allow users to register but only give them access after you have approved them. For our use case, we will add users ourselves. Now, throughout the building process, as you explore new things, you'll see guides pop up with links and tips. Don't be afraid to read and navigate to those links. They will take you to our knowledge base where you will find other helpful resources. Okay, so once we have activated our user roles, a couple things to note here. Our Pro plan and above comes with additional security settings, so you can specify the time at which an inactive logged in user is logged out, as well as set some password requirements. So definitely some great additional security features available to you with our Pro plans and above to make your app more secure. One thing I would like to mention here, in the first step, we are just enabling accounts. Accounts will show you all of the users of your app. However, if you want to limit the level of access a user has to the data, we will need to create multiple user roles. By creating separate roles under accounts like customer and or the business manager, this gives us the ability to assign roles to the account users and additionally collect different information for each role. Also, by doing this, we can further limit the level of access to our data based on the user role. In our customer portal app, since we want to give our customers access to our app and their data only, we will add a customer user role. Now, you will see when we added a new user role, default fields have been added for us. Name, email, password, user role, and status. These cannot be deleted. However, you can add new fields by selecting from the menu at the top. And up here you have various field types to choose from. Please take note that there's a drop-down arrow next to some of these options. Now for our use case, maybe we want to add a phone field, and an address field. Now, I will also mention here that each field has its own set of options. You can access these options by clicking the gear icon and going into your settings, or by clicking anywhere in the gray area. You'll see each field has its own set of options. This is also where you can add validation rules as well as any conditional rules that you have. Now, with that said, I encourage you to explore before you really get into building out your app. There are lots of great features that will go missed if you don't let your Explorer out. So when you get in the builder, click on everything, see where it takes you. One last note, if you click the actual field type name here, this will give you options to change the field type. Word of caution, be careful here. Any changes to the field type can remove values from the records, and there is no way to undo this. So the next step in building out our app is to create an object to manage information about the services. You can add a new object by clicking on the Add button here. Objects can be started from scratch or created by importing a spreadsheet. You can also quickly add a templated object like a company object or an employee object. For this demo, we will create our services object from scratch. Objects like user roles will be seen on the left-hand side, and our fields will be seen here on the right. Each new object starts with a default field, and then fields can be added from selecting from the menu above. For the services object, we'll add the following fields: a multiple choice field for system types, a multiple choice field for services needed, a paragraph field for instructions and comments, and a multiple choice field for managing the status. Now, as you can see, creating your objects and user roles are pretty straightforward. Before moving on to the next step in building out our app, I do want to show the additional settings section that you have for your object. You'll notice this menu up here that shows fields, records, tasks, and settings. All the records for each object are also available in the data section of your builder. Records can be added here directly or with forms in your live application. Tasks are automated actions that can be applied to or for defined records on a scheduled basis. So daily, weekly, monthly, you may want to schedule an email to go out to alert you of a change in the database. Scheduled tasks are available with our Pro plans and above, so really great if you're looking to automate part of your workflow. The Settings tab, this is where you can edit options for the object. You can rename your object. You can set the field that best identifies the record using the display field. This works like a lookup field. And then you also have the default sort order here that sets the sort order for your drop-down menus and things like that. Before we get too far ahead, I want to clean up my services object a bit. We won't be using the default field that was created when we added our object, so we can easily remove this field by heading to the gear icon here and clicking delete. Okay, great. So now that we have our user role created and our object created to collect the service information, we now need to connect or associate our service record with the customer. We can do this by adding a connection field. Adding connections to our objects will allow us to associate our data across objects and further create pages that show the logged in user only records that they are associated with. You can add a connection by clicking on the Add Connection button link on the far right side of the builder. But before doing that, I want to pause here to talk a bit more about connections and how they work. Now, you only need to add one connection field to create a connection between two objects. Simple enough. However, which object should you add that field to? Using our customer portal as an example, each customer is going to submit many service requests. In Knack, it is best practice to add the connection field to the object with many connections. So in this case, we would add the connection field inside the service object. This will also allow us to assign or associate each service request to a customer, and a customer can now submit many of these service requests. So let's go ahead and add that connection. We'll choose the customer object to connect to. And by default, it sets this to one-to-many. All right, so what's next? We have defined our data, we have added our user roles, our objects, and set up our connections. The next step would be to build out our pages. But before we begin building out our pages, we'll need to add some test data. Now, one best practice I'd like to share about test data, you'll learn that there's a couple different ways to add records to your database. We will be adding test data from our data tab. However, a majority of your data will be added from the live app. Also good to note here that during the building phase, we highly recommend, and I would consider this again a best practice, use test data. We definitely recommend adding data when you are closer to the finish line and no major app changes need to be made. So a lot of times we have customers import all of their data only to learn that there is a more efficient way to handle a workflow. Then they make changes, they delete the connections, add them elsewhere, and then they break their app, which then leads to them having to rebuild things and sometimes leads them to having to manually update hundreds of records one by one. So that's no fun. So just a word of caution there, use test data as you're building out your app. All right, with that said, let's add some test data. I'm going to add a new user under the customer user role so that I can log into my app when I'm ready to view and test out my live app. All right. So let's head over to the Pages tab. This is where we're going to build out the pages of our app. This is what users will see when viewing and interacting with the live app. Well, not this actual page, but these are the pages we're going to be creating for them to see. Now, a page in Knack is similar to a web page. You can navigate through multiple pages using menus and links, and like in our customer portal demo, on each page, you can add visual elements that can display or update the records in your database. And again, we call these views, and you can see them here on the right. You'll see that Knack comes with flexible views to build your app, and this includes tables, searches, forms, calendars, and maps, and you'll see there's a bunch of other different options here too for sharing your data. Now I will note that the form views can be used to add and edit your records, and the other views are used to display your data. So thinking about our customer portal again, we want our users to take the following actions. We want them to log in, see their service requests and invoices, and submit any new requests. So let's add a page that requires a login and then add a view that shows only the service records connected to the logged in user. The first step will be to choose whether we want to require a login to access the page. This is where we will limit permission to a specific user role. For our customer portal, we want to create a page for the customer and show the customer only their records. The second step will be to choose which object the page will work with. In order to limit what the customer will see, we will select to show only service records connected to the logged in user. The third step will be to choose the views you want to work with the object records. In our customer portal example, we'll choose a menu link that links to a page with a form view that allows us to add a new service request, and we'll add a table view of all service requests for that customer. And additionally, we'll add a link to view more details about that service request. So now we can name the page and add new. Now take notice, you'll see that there is a key icon just to the left of the page name. This lets us know that the pages here and below are behind a login, so no one will be able to see them without logging in. Okay, so let's take a closer look at our views here on the right. Some good things to know about views. They can be edited or removed by heading to the gear icon here. Removing views does not remove the object from your database, it just removes it from the page. Each view can be edited by clicking on the gear icon or anywhere in the gray area. Now in the settings, you'll see that each view has several options to configure from the left-hand side. And you'll see your object's fields here on the right-hand side. If you hover over a field, you can see a pencil icon for editing and a trash can to remove. Now looking back at the left panel, there are a lot of goodies in these settings. So please, please, please explore, see what each of those settings do, and test things out. So starting at the top, we have our data source tab, and this is where you can sort and filter records. So when we were looking at our services page and we were able to see open services and complete services, this is where you can do that filtering for that view. So if we wanted to filter the table out to show only open services, we would do that here. This also lets us know what this view is actually doing or what we are looking at. So play around. Data source is very important. The next section you'll see is either an input section for form views, a detail section for detailed views, or column sections for table views. We are looking at our table view, so we will be looking at a column section. Some of the cool things you can do in your view options: you can access fields from connected objects. You can also add links to your tables. You can add an edit link, a delete link. You can also additionally add the view more details link, which we already have in our table. The next tab here is the filters tab, and this is where you can set some filtering on the table. I won't get into it here, but definitely something you'll want to play around with. And you can further customize on the options tab. Oh, and before I forget, a couple features to point out here. On this options tab is where you can enable keyword search. You can turn on things like record exporting and inline editing, where you can make updates inline on your table like you would in a spreadsheet. Okay, good stuff there. So going back in our form views, we can even automate some of our workflow by using record rules. For example, let's go back to our service request form. We will want to use our record rules to automatically set the status field. I'm going to remove this field from my form and head to the Form Rules tab in this left panel. Now on this Form Rules tab, you'll see a menu of options here on the right. I'm going to head to the Record Rules tab. Now I know you're seeing a couple of other tabs and may be wondering, what are those? This is where I encourage you to explore. So please explore and see what those other tabs are about. Okay, so now on Record Rules, I'm going to add a rule that when this form is submitted, I want to automatically set my status field to open, since every request being submitted by the customer from this form is new. Now, before we leave the form settings, take note of the different options in the form view settings. I definitely like to point out here that if you want to send an email to admin or customers when a form is submitted, you can set up this automation using the email tab here. Yeah, lots of goodies. Don't be afraid to explore. Let's save those changes. So now my form will automatically set the status field to open. Fantastic. Okay. Now, before we view our live app, I want to clean this up a bit. We have this home page that we are not using. If you want to remove pages from your app, you can click on the gear icon and click delete to remove the page. Well, all right, we did it. So this completes the building of our app. So let's view what we've built so far. You can access your live app by clicking on the link in the far right corner, and this is going to open up a new browser window for us to be able to view our app. And you'll see, once we get to this page here, you'll see that we can now log in with the test data that we created. So now we're logged into our customer portal dashboard. You can see we have our menu view that we created here, and you can see that we can now add a new service request. Okay, so once the form is submitted, we can navigate back to our dashboard and see the new service request on our table. Yep, and so there it is. Awesome. So this concludes the tour demo of Knack and building out your first app. I'd like to use the remaining time to answer the questions that you've shared, or answer any questions that you may have. Feel free, share your questions in the chat window or in the Q&A section.